Donald Trump was just spotted leaving Trump Tower to head to a Manhattan courtroom for the first day of his Stormy Daniels hush money trial. Now, the next few weeks, they're focusing solely on jury selection. They need to find 12 jurors and 6 alternates, and it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be hard to find 18 people that have no pre-existing bias when it comes to Donald Trump, and it's going to be hard to find 18 people who live in Manhattan who haven't even heard about one of the most high-profile cases out there. But I'm going to run you through some of the questions they'll use to vet people. I'm going to go through some of Trump's BS claims about gag orders. Trump has already given multiple interviews outside of the courtroom and sent off multiple Truth Social posts. So there is a lot to cover here. Firstly, at about 5:30 a.m. this morning, Trump sent out a Truth Social post, and in it, he completely ignores the gag order as if it doesn't exist, posting article after article attacking the judge's daughter and posts attacking key witnesses. But he always has to be the whiny victim because that's who he is, a soft, weak, insecure crybaby, according to Ron Filipkowski. But that's true. He said, "I want my voice back. The crooked judge has gagged me. Unconstitutional. The other side can talk about me, but I am not allowed to talk about them. Rigged trial." Trump, you went on a crime spree and are a criminal defendant in a high-profile case, and you have a history of attacking the judge's family members, the clerks sitting in the court. You have a history of riling up your supporters to commit violence, so yeah, you can't just go into that courtroom and start saying random BS. You can't keep posting on Truth Social about the judge. Donald Trump keeps trying to test the limits of these gag orders because he knows if he gets punished for violating one of these gag orders, he can act even more like a victim or a martyr who is being targeted by the system, when in reality, if any other criminal defendant would have been testing these gag orders and attacking the judge online like this, then they would have immediately been reprimanded. But Donald Trump is a special case, I guess.
Like this has never happened before. There's never been anything like it. Every legal scholar said this case is nonsense. It should never have been brought. It doesn't deserve anything like this. There is no case, and they've said it. People that don't necessarily follow or like Donald Trump said this is an outrage that this case was brought.
I have more clips to play for you, but Donald Trump posted a Truth Social post this morning with very similar sentiment to what he just said there. He said, "As virtually every legal scholar has powerfully stated, the Biden Manhattan witch hunt case is, among other things, barred by the statute of limitations. This trial should be ended by the highly conflicted presiding judge." Now, Donald Trump's idea of a legal scholar is who? Tom Fitton, Alina Habba, Kimberly Guilfoyle, even people like John Eastman. These people are all hacks. When you have Rudy Giuliani and Mike Lindell next to you throughout everything, you have to start second guessing whether or not you're on the right track. Whenever Donald Trump makes those sweeping statements like virtually every judge thinks this or thinks that, you already know he's BSing. But then again, Donald Trump is BSing every single time he opens his mouth. But when it comes to the statute of limitations, do you really think the judge hasn't taken that into account? Do you really think the judge just swept over the statute of limitations and kept the case moving? No. Judge Merchan has already explained his reasoning extensively. This article says, Trump and his lawyers have repeatedly argued that the 34 felony falsifying business charges he faces were filed outside of the 5-year statute of limitations, but the timeline for bringing criminal charges was extended by more than a year during the pandemic, and prosecutors will also argue that the 5-year clock was paused whenever Trump spent extended periods living in Florida. That is how it works in New York. It's not that the judge just hasn't even considered the statute of limitations. That is insane.
This is political persecution. This is a persecution like never before. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And again, it's a case that should have never been brought. It's an assault on America. And that's why I'm very proud to be here. This is an assault on our country. And it's a country that's failing. It's a country that's run by an incompetent man who's very much involved in this case. This is really an attack on a political opponent. That's all it is.
So I'm about to cover some of the questions that they'll be using to vet this jury, but firstly, how will this affect his campaign? Is Trump likely to actually lose any voters? And I think he is. I think it's very likely. Jason Miller, who is one of Trump's campaign directors, I've actually met him multiple times in Iowa, he just tweeted out this photo saying wall to wall, showing that there is wall to wall coverage of Donald Trump talking outside of the courtroom. But this links perfectly to this other article From Public Notice that Aaron Rupar boosted, it says, when you combine the damning evidence prosecutors will present with the fact that Trump won't be able to control himself during the trial, there is a real chance for wall-to-wall unfavorable coverage. No wonder he's desperate to make this go away. He's also desperate to downplay this case and say, oh, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that I'm showing up. Historic trial, but I can guarantee you he is not happy whatsoever. This will cut into his campaigning and it's just very unfavorable coverage in a high-stakes time, in a time where Joe Biden is rising in the polls, Joe Biden is ramping up his campaign, fundraising all of this money, and Donald Trump is stuck here. I'm sure he is pissed off about it. So the judge laid out some ground rules. You are not allowed to ask the jurors about how they voted in the past, whether they voted for or against Donald Trump. You are not allowed to ask about specific political affiliations, and you are not allowed to ask about campaign contributions. But there are still 42 questions that will sort of weed some of these people out in the same way. And these questions include, have you, a relative, or a close friend ever worked for any company or organization that is owned or run by Donald Trump or anyone in his family? Have you, a relative, or a close friend ever worked or volunteered for a Trump presidential campaign, the Trump presidential administration, or any other political entity affiliated with Donald Trump? Have you ever attended a rally or a campaign event for Donald Trump? Are you signed up for, or have you ever been signed up for, subscribed to, or followed any newsletter or email listing run by or on behalf of Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization? Do you currently follow Donald Trump on any social media site, or have you done so in the past? Have you, a relative, or a close friend ever worked or volunteered for any anti-Trump group or organization? Have you ever attended a rally or a campaign event for any anti-Trump group or organization? Are you signed up for, or have you ever been signed up for, any newsletter or email listing run by or on behalf of any anti-Trump group or organization? Now, there are a bunch of other questions that are pretty standard for a legal case, but these ones will help the judge and the lawyers weed out any pro-Trump or anti-Trump sentiment so they can attempt to get the most unbiased, fair jury that they can. Now, I want to quickly cover this article written in Public Notice by Lisa Needham that breaks down Trump's strategy heading into this court case and why it may backfire. This article is titled, Trump's criminal hush money trial is a big deal. If he really thinks it's a nothing burger, he certainly isn't acting like it. And she wrote, despite a comically high number of attempts to stave it off, Donald Trump is set to face his first criminal trial later today. It remains to be seen whether he'll be able to control his behavior any better than he did in his civil trials for defamation and fraud. But given his inability or willful refusal to adhere to gag orders in the run-up to the trial, it seems unlikely. She says Trump has been fighting dirty in the court of public opinion. Since Trump couldn't prevail on dismissing the criminal charges, he pivoted to two familiar behaviors: personal attacks and scorched earth litigation. After the prosecution presented evidence that Trump had targeted prosecutors and court employees, Judge Merchan imposed a limited gag order on March 26th. Trump immediately responded by attacking the judge's daughter, leading to the gag order being expanded to prevent attacks on the judge's family. She then says none of this is good for Trump. This case is likely the only one that goes to trial before the election, given that Trump has had greater success obtaining procedural delays in his other criminal trials. Arguably, this case represents the least satisfying set of charges against Trump. This may be true. I'm a big fan of this Jack Smith election fraud trial. That one I can't wait for. That's not because what Trump did here wasn't a real crime or that his behavior isn't indicative of his comprehensively criminal mindset. Instead, it's that the underlying facts are already well known because of Michael Cohen's indictment and plea that, as appalling as a hush money scheme might be, it pales in comparison to stealing classified documents, trying to overturn an election, and inciting an insurrection. I actually agree. I think the other ones are way, way bigger cases. There's a bit of an Al Capone went down for tax evasion vibe about the whole thing. However, Trump, who spent most of his weekend melting down on Truth Social, is not behaving like a person who thinks this criminal trial is small potatoes or that he is guaranteed to win. Even if he prevails at the trial or gets a conviction overturned on one of the numerous issues he's already appealed, that won't unring the bell of everyone outside the courtroom hearing all of the evidence laid out cleanly that the prosecution will present. When you combine that with the fact that Trump will likely not be able to control himself during the trial, there is a real chance for the next several weeks to be wall-to-wall unfavorable coverage. No wonder he's so desperate to make this all go away. And going into this, Donald Trump has been attempting something to make this all seem like a nothing burger, like a politically motivated trial that doesn't have any actual evidence. And that will backfire once people see that there is a mountain of evidence. There is a paper trail that Donald Trump and his lawyers left. And this wall-to-wall unfavorable coverage is coming at a very perfect time, like I said, because Joe Biden is just ramping up the attacks. So this is just pure speculation, but I feel like after this trial, after Joe Biden and his campaign team effectively attack Donald Trump for it, we'll see the polls begin to widen even more. I mean, over the past few weeks, we've seen Joe Biden gain a small edge over Donald Trump. It went from, let's say, 51 Trump to 50 Biden, but now Biden's at 52. That's just the average on the polls. But I think that Joe Biden will continue to rise in the polls as these trials go on, as this unfavorable coverage is blasted across the country, and all of this will backfire for Donald Trump. My name is Adam Mockler. I'll be covering this trial as it goes on. Make sure to leave a like, make sure to subscribe, comment a blue heart, but most importantly, make sure to have a great week.